All right, here is my essay I wrote for Niederhauser Library. I was asked by them actually to write this essay because they saw that I spent time there, and I have spent time there since I think 2012. And I wrote many essays there. I finished a PhD there, and I finished my first book at Niederhauser Library. So, and I thought it would be quite fitting for the coming Renaissance series to read this essay. What we need is more islands of stillness and more genuine darkness, perhaps, too. The stillness of the library. There aren't many places left in the world which know and cherish stillness. The library is such a place, or at least it should be. For in stillness, thought can open up to the world, and human beings can come into touch with themselves. Niederhauser Library is one of the last islands of stillness in the rapids of the metropolis that is London. At least it was for me over many years, before London entered its own period of stillness this year. I remember when I first arrived into the Big Smoke, nearly 8 years ago now. I had just finished my undergraduate studies in Bolzano, a small mountain town in the north of Italy, and I was about to embark on my academic journey in the UK at King's College London. The prospect of chaos in the big city at first had some appeal, but it took me some time to appreciate the beat of this wondrous city and its many hidden angles and corners. As Nietzsche says, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. Niederhauser Library was recommended to me by a professor at King's early on in my MA. It was the first time I walked up towards Russell Square from the Strand, where my King's College campus was, the philosophy department. I took an idle detour through the British Museum and couldn't quite fathom at the time that I could come to a place, Niederhauser Library, to read and study every day and visit this sublime museum during breaks. Niederhauser, this Art Deco palace, beckoned in all its might and somewhat out-of-place glory when I left the museum through the rear entrance. It was, of course, a rather rainy day. The London drizzle had fully taken control of the landscape in October, so it was difficult to look up. I only began to realize the magnitude of the building after making my way through the foyer and up to the elevators into the library. There might be architecturally more pompous or beautiful libraries in the world, older ones, and libraries built properly as libraries. Still, Niederhauser Library has its specific charms. It has a bold character. It is a bit like a throne to itself, presiding over Fitzrovia, Soho, and Russell Square, and it wasn't too far from that building that the Wheatsheaf poets met at their pub. One of them was George Orwell, who found in the building of what's now Senate House inspiration for his big brother, the big, anonymous, bureaucratic other. Yet inside the library, I never had this sensation. In fact, being so high above London, there was a quality of lightness, of bearable lightness, if you allow me to say so. One was lifted above the things of the everyday, and so one's mind was free to roam. Years ago, the library at Senate House was still more of a maze, a labyrinth, more so than it is now. After I had spent a year there, a new acquaintance of mine mentioned some ominous room packed with leather sofas. Now, today, the room can be easily found, but just a few years ago one almost had to climb into it, through the 5th floor, I think, through some back room no one ever used, and if you turned in the right direction, you sensed some relief, for you were close to finding the most well-kept leisurely secret of central London, the periodicals room at Senate House Library, packed with leather sofas. Narrow souls I cannot abide, Nietzsche says in The Gay Science. The soul needs places where it can lose itself and feel at home for that reason. I often stumbled upon lonely readers somewhere all the way in the back of the 6th floor in the library, hiding from the world, deeply drawn into the argument of a book, often smiling as they lose themselves and then resurface back into the presence of others. We readers make silent bonds amongst each other when we sit for hours alongside one another, wondering where each other's minds might be wandering at that moment. The howling winds we could often hear, especially on the 6th floor, the floor of the Splendid Philosophies collection, was often the only thing reminding oneself of the fleeting world outside. When night fell after a day of reading and writing, I packed my bag, returned the books, wished good night to staff and security, and off I walked home. In my early years in London, I spent many a Dickensian night walking all the way back from my humble oasis of quiet at Russell Square to my room in Whitechapel. I walked to and back from the library because I couldn't afford to travel by bus every night. But those walks to and from the library were inextricably part of my journey. I gathered my thoughts on my way to the library and back. The place where I wrote my MA thesis on Kant's notion of radical evil, and where I came years later to finish my thesis on Heidegger on death and being, and where last year in 2019 I completed the manuscript for my first academic book, which is on Heidegger on death and being and set to be published by Springer sometime later this year, hopefully. I've been writing this essay in the past tense, as though this is all a thing of the past. It isn't. Sometimes thinking of something in the clear past tense lets one cherish what's at stake again, and even more so, what something stands for. Just as the stillness inside the library provided space to learn, think, and reflect, the world outside the library is now trying to embrace the stillness. In the face of the unknown, the uncertain, which has made a forceful return, we are reminded of Heidegger's silent call of conscience, which is closest world to human beings. And a new world perhaps is on the horizon. Senate House Library has survived much worse, and so it will stand strong in our absence, being there while London is navigating the dark waters of this new horizon. When students of all disciplines can come together again safely, in search of stillness, knowledge, and solemn camaraderie, Senate House, I'm sure, will be the island of stillness again, the guiding light for studious souls once again. So thank you all very much for listening, and keep well. I wish you a very good week.